This paper is over 100 years old. You can feel the weight of it just by looking. Real parchment, thick, yellowed, with that texture only time produces. At the center, a two-headed eagle staring in opposite directions. Below it, a number, a value, in gold rubles. The empire that printed this paper was destroyed by a revolution. The Tsar who signed it met his final fate alongside his entire family on a July night in 1918 in a basement in the Ural Mountains. The currency printed on it is accepted at no bank on the planet. To a historian, this paper is a relic. To a collector, it belongs in a museum. But at certain specialized trading desks in London and New York, this paper is still an active financial claim. Someone is still collecting on this debt, and in some cases, as we are about to see, actually getting paid. This is a bond issued by the Russian imperial government, and it is part of something much larger, a hidden market for the debts of nations that no longer exist. From the Qing dynasty of China to the Ottoman Empire, which controlled 3 continents for 6 centuries, these papers represent one of the strangest and least discussed corners of global finance. How does a debt survive the fall of the government that created it? In this episode, we're going to track that answer through 3 real cases. We will watch an empire lose control of its own finances without losing its throne. We will watch a naval warship get seized in a West African port because of a debt 11 years in default. And we will understand why, in 2026, this logic is more alive than ever. The flag can change, the borders can be redrawn, but the record remains, and someone always knows where it is kept. Petrograd, October 1917. The Bolsheviks have just taken the Winter Palace. Lenin is in power. And one of the first things he does, before reorganizing the army, before redrawing the country's borders, is sign a financial decree. Russia will not pay the Tsar's debts. Simple as that. Billions in French francs. Hundreds of millions in British pounds. Loans that had financed wars, railways, imperial palaces, all of it cancelled with a pen on an autumn afternoon. The Bolsheviks believed they had closed the matter. They had not. In Paris, the panic arrived before the next morning's coffee. Because the creditors of Tsarist Russia were not just banks. They were ordinary citizens, teachers, merchants, middle-class French families who had bought Russian government bonds as a form of savings. The French government had actively encouraged these purchases. Russia was a reliable partner. The bonds paid well. Overnight, that savings became worthless paper. Hundreds of thousands of French families lost everything they had set aside. Not in the stock market, not through speculation. In bonds issued by a sovereign government that simply said, "We are not paying." This is counterparty risk taken to its extreme. The danger that the party on the other side of your contract simply disappears. Or worse, decides the contract no longer exists. But the global financial system did not accept the Bolshevik logic, not because it was unfair, because it was too dangerous for everyone. Think about it this way. If a revolution can cancel any sovereign debt, then no government bond anywhere in the world is safe. No country can borrow. The global sovereign debt market, which moves trillions of dollars and finances everything from hospitals to wars, collapses entirely. To prevent that, international law developed over 2 centuries a doctrine called state succession. The idea is straightforward. The debt is tied to the territory and the people, not to the specific government that took it on. When one government falls and another takes over, the new government inherits the obligations of the previous one. As the condition for participating in the global financial system, it is like buying a house with unpaid association fees. The apartment may have changed hands, but the debt remains. The Soviet Union learned this the hard way. By refusing to recognize the Tsarist debt, the new Soviet state was cut off from the liquidity cycles of the West. the international credit networks that allow a modern nation to function in the world. No access to foreign loans, no insurance for merchant ships, no participation in the trade systems that every industrial economy needs to grow. It was not a declared punishment. It was an automatic consequence. The system simply closed its doors, and outside those closed doors, people were holding paper. To understand what happens to that paper, and why some of it is worth real money decades later, we need to look at the year 1920 through the eyes of an investor in Paris. Let's call him Henri. Henri is 50 years old. He worked his entire life. He saved carefully. And part of those savings were in Russian government bonds, legacy assets, instruments designed to last for generations, backed by the word of an empire with 300 years of history. Now those bonds are worth less than the paper they are printed on. Everyone around Henri is saying the same thing. Take the loss, move on, forget about it. Henri does not move on. He puts the bonds in a safe. Not out of sentimentality. Henri is not a sentimental man, out of cold logic. He knows that Russia, whatever name the government in power may carry, will one day need credit again. Every nation does. And when that day comes, the financial markets of the West will have a condition. They always do. Henri's safe stayed locked for years. Stalin came to power. World War II came and went. The Cold War divided the world in two. The paper stayed inside, waiting. The question was never whether Russia would someday need to return to the market. The question was, when that moment came, who would be sitting across the table, with the safe open in their hands? This pattern, debt that survives the collapse of the government that created it and resurfaces decades later as a tool of pressure, is not unique to Russia. To understand the full scale of it, we need to leave Europe and go to China. In 1911, the Qing dynasty, the last imperial dynasty of China, which had governed the country for nearly 300 years, issued a series of bonds to finance the construction of a railway, the Hukuang line, connecting the center and south of the country. A massive project. The bonds were sold in the London and New York markets. American and British investors bought them. That same year, the Qing dynasty fell. The Republic was proclaimed. Then came civil war. Then Mao Zedong and the People's Republic in 1949. The new Chinese government declared that it did not recognize the debts of previous regimes. Regimes it described as instruments of a century of humiliation by foreign powers. The Hukuang railway bonds became old paper in the drawers of American collectors. For decades, no one paid much attention, until the 1980s when China began opening to the global market. When Beijing started negotiating access to Western capital, entry into international organizations, trade agreements with the United States. That is when the bonds resurfaced. American holders of these papers, some inherited from grandparents, some purchased for cents at antique auctions, began organizing. Bondholder associations were formed, cases were brought to courts. The US government used the existence of this debt as a pressure point in diplomatic negotiations with Beijing. China never paid. But it was compelled to sit at the table and confront a debt tied to an emperor who had passed away decades before anyone present at the negotiation had even been born. This is sovereign wealth history in motion. The idea that the financial history of a nation does not begin with the current government. It begins with the first paper someone signed in the name of that territory. And that paper, depending on who holds it and where the courthouse is, can have real consequences today. The record survived the fall of emperors. It survived the rise of communism. It survived 2 world wars. But Henri's safe and the Hukuang railway bonds are only the beginning of this story. Because there is a case where this logic reached its absolute limit. A case where creditors did not wait decades holding old papers. They built a parallel government inside a sovereign empire and ran it for nearly 50 years. Who were they, and how did they pull it off? The answer is in Istanbul, 1875. The Ottoman Empire still exists. The flag still flies. The Sultan still rules. But in the chancelleries of Paris, London, and Berlin, a piece of news is moving quietly between bankers and ministers. The empire cannot pay its debts. It was not a complete surprise. Since 1854, when it entered its first loan contracts with European creditors to finance the Crimean War, the Ottoman Empire had borrowed without stopping. Wars, railways, the expenses of the imperial court, every deficit covered with a new loan, every loan carrying interest that demanded the next one. In October 1875, the Ottoman government announced it could no longer meet its debt obligations in full, a partial suspension that became a complete default the following year. The Ottoman Empire was suspending payments on its external debt, the largest sovereign default of the 19th century. European creditors responded with a pressure that combined diplomacy, financial leverage, and the kind of coordinated elite capital management that only the major financial centers of the era could organize. France and the United Kingdom, whose citizens held the largest share of Ottoman bonds, pressed their governments. The governments pressed Istanbul. The negotiations lasted 6 years. What emerged on December 20th, 1881, was something the world had never seen before. The Decree of Muharrem created the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, the OPDA. And the OPDA was not a negotiating agency. It was not an intermediary bank. It was a government inside the government. To understand what the OPDA actually meant in practice, we need to leave Istanbul and go to a village in the Anatolian countryside. The year is 1890. Ahmed works as a tax collector in a silk-producing region. He wears the uniform of the empire. He speaks in the name of the Sultan. He collects the silk production tax from every weaver, every family raising silkworms in the hills. But the money Ahmed collects does not go to the imperial treasury in Istanbul. It goes to London. Ahmed does not know the names of the creditors. He does not know what a sovereign bond is. He only knows that there is an administration above the provincial governor, above the Minister of Finance, above the Sultan himself. And that administration has one single, non-negotiable priority, that payments reach the European creditors on time. As documented in research published by Cambridge University Press on the financial history of the Ottoman Empire, the OPDA assumed direct authority over approximately 25% of all imperial tax revenue. The taxes under its control, salt, tobacco, alcohol, silk, fishing, custom stamps, entire revenue streams, not percentages, entire streams, redirected away from the imperial treasury to the creditors before any other state expenditure was made. The council governing the OPDA included representatives from France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, and the Netherlands. The Sultan had the right to appoint one member, just one. At the height of its operations, the OPDA employed 9,000 people, more than the Ottoman Ministry of Finance itself. The empire had a budget, but who decided what was left for the Sultan to spend was the council in Istanbul that answered to the creditors in Paris and London. This is monetary sovereignty reduced to its most exposed form, the real capacity of a state to control its own finances. The Ottoman Empire had the flag, it had the army, it had the throne. But the actual financial sovereignty, who controlled where the money went, belonged to others. The OPDA operated for decades. It survived wars. It survived crises. It survived the slow collapse of the empire it controlled. When World War I ended, the Ottoman Empire was on the losing side. The empire was dismembered. The Republic of Turkey was proclaimed in 1923 by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. A new nation, with a new constitution, a new capital, a new identity. The debt was not forgotten. The Treaty of Lausanne of 1923, the international agreement that recognized the Republic of Turkey, distributed the obligations of the Ottoman debt among the new states that emerged from the collapse of the empire. Turkey inherited the largest share. The Republic of Turkey made its final payment on the Ottoman debt in 1954. Consider that number, 1954. 31 years after the end of the empire, 70 years after the first loan, an entirely new nation, with a generation of citizens who had never lived under the Sultan, paying the bill for decisions made decades before they were born. The intergenerational wealth defense built into that system of creditors, the capacity to protect and perpetuate a financial claim across generations and political collapses, worked precisely as it was designed to work, not for a single family, for an entire architecture of creditors who understood how to position their claims inside a legal framework that would outlast the borrower. The method was the inheritance, not the name. But if the story of the OPDA is the extreme case of the past, creditors assuming fiscal control of an empire, what happens when the same logic is applied in the 21st century with modern legal instruments in an American court in a port on the West African coast? To understand that, we need to go to Buenos Aires. December 2001. Argentina has just declared the largest sovereign default in history at that time. $100 billion in external debt. The banking system freezes deposits. People are breaking ATMs in the streets. The country goes through 5 presidents in 2 weeks. The chaos is real. And in the middle of that chaos, papers are changing hands at liquidation prices. Certain specialized funds, known as holdout creditors, investors who refuse to accept debt restructurings, bought Argentine bonds during the crisis when they were worth cents on the dollar. Not as a conventional investment, as a long-term strategy. They understood that Argentina would one day need to return to the market, and when that moment came, they would be waiting. Between 2005 and 2010, the Argentine government negotiated with its creditors. It offered a restructuring, accept less than we owe you, or risk receiving nothing at all. 91% of creditors accepted, between 25 and 35 cents on the dollar. It was one of the largest sovereign debt restructurings in history. 9% did not accept. Among them, NML Capital, a subsidiary of the hedge fund Elliott Capital Management, incorporated in the Cayman Islands. As documented by the law firm Herbert Smith Freehills in case reports on the litigation, and confirmed by NPR and the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, NML had purchased the Argentine bonds at liquidation prices during the crisis, and was now demanding payment at full face value. In American courts, the fund won. A judgment of $1.3 billion, then $1.7 billion. Argentina refused to pay and invoked sovereign immunity, so the fund began hunting Argentine assets around the world. A bank account here, a property there. Any asset belonging to the Argentine state in a favorable jurisdiction became a target. That is how we arrive in Ghana, October 2nd, 2012. Port of Timor, Ghana, West Africa. The ARA Libertad, a training frigate of the Argentine Navy, carrying 326 crew members, including naval cadets from several South American countries on a training voyage, docks in the port. Hours later, a Ghanaian judge signs a detention order. The ship cannot leave. NML Capital had filed an arrest request with the Ghanaian courts, using the American judgment as its basis. The demand: Argentina must deposit $20 million as a guarantee before the ship would be permitted to depart. The Argentine Navy evacuated 281 crew members. The captain and a reduced crew remained on board. Argentina's naval training ship was detained in a West African port because of a debt 11 years in default. The head of the Argentine Navy resigned. President Cristina Kirchner stepped to the microphone. "As long as I am president, they can keep the frigate. But the sovereignty of this country, no one keeps that. The case went to the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. On December 15, 2012, 77 days after the detention, the tribunal ordered Ghana to release the ship immediately. The ruling was unanimous. A warship is an extension of state sovereignty and cannot be subject to civil arrest. The frigate departed on December 19th, but the case did not end there. Argentina was ultimately forced to negotiate. In 2016, 15 years after the original default, the country reached an agreement with the holdouts. NML Capital and the other funds received approximately $2.4 billion. They had bought those bonds for cents during the crisis. The debt had survived the largest default in history, 5 presidents, 2 restructurings, an attempted warship seizure in a West African port, and 15 years of legal battle across 3 continents. The 0 point of value, the moment when an asset appears to be worth absolutely nothing, is not the end of the story. For those who understand the system, it is where the story begins. Let's step back for a moment. Before we arrive at 2026, we need to pass through 1834. For centuries, the British financial system did not use paper to record debts. It used wood. Tally sticks were hazel rods split in half. Every transaction, every loan, every tax payment, every royal credit was notched into the rod before it was split. One half stayed with the creditor, the other with the debtor. The only way to verify a debt was to fit the 2 halves together and confirm that the notches matched. It was the simplest possible system of immutability. No ink that could be altered, no paper that could be forged. The halves either fit or they did not. There was no middle ground. This system worked for centuries. It financed wars. It recorded taxes. It supported the economy of a rising empire. In 1834, the British government decided it was time to modernize. Tally sticks were archaic. Paper had arrived. The old rods were collected and brought to Parliament to be burned in the furnaces below. The furnaces overheated. The fire got out of control. The Palace of Westminster, the seat of the British Parliament, one of the most important buildings in the country's history, was destroyed by the flames. The physical memory of centuries of British financial transactions turned to ash in a single night. The attempt to erase the past and start fresh burned the house down. In 2022, the European Union froze approximately $300 billion in Russian sovereign reserves, deposits held within the global European custody system, primarily at Euroclear in Brussels, in response to the invasion of Ukraine. These were not trade sanctions. These were not passport restrictions. This was the direct freezing of a sovereign state's financial assets inside the very system that state had used for decades to store its reserves. Russia had the money. The money existed. The records existed. But access to the system that validates those records, that access was cut. This is the ghost sovereign in reverse. Not an extinguished debt surviving the government that created it, but a live asset belonging to a government that still exists, separated from its owner by the control of the custody architecture. The mechanism is the same one we have seen 3 times in this episode. Different technology, same logic. Now look at the 3 cases together. The Ottoman OPDA of 1881 controlled 25% of the empire's revenue because it controlled the process of collecting and recording the taxes. The Sultan still reigned. But who decided where the money went was the Creditors' Council. NML Capital managed to detain an Argentine warship because it controlled a judgment in an American court, the legal validation system for the debt. Argentina was still sovereign, but its sovereignty had a limit. The reach of Argentine assets in jurisdictions where the judgment was enforceable. The $300 billion in Russian reserves are frozen because they sit inside a custody system that follows Western rules, not the rules of the government that deposited them. Russia is still sovereign, but its external assets depend on an architecture it does not control. 3 cases, 3 centuries, 1 mechanism. Whoever controls the record-keeping system controls access to the asset. And whoever controls access to the asset can, under specific and documented conditions, change what a sovereign state is actually able to do, without ever crossing its borders. The financial archaeology of this episode reveals something the record has always shown. The sovereignty of a nation has never been only a matter of borders and armies. It has always also been a matter of who validates the record. In the past, that record was notched wood. Then it was parchment with an imperial seal. Then it was paper printed in New York with American jurisdiction clauses. Today it is in a server in Brussels. The technology changed 4 times. The logic did not change once. If this episode changed the way you think about the word sovereignty, share it with someone who needs to see this. The financial archaeology exists to excavate exactly this kind of mechanism, the unwritten rules that move the world's money. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Next episode. For centuries, the trade routes of Central Asia ran without gold, without silver, without paper money. The monetary standard was a pressed brick of tea, and the logic behind that choice reveals something surprising about what makes anything worth money at all. The tea brick standard. Why Central Asia ignored gold for centuries. If a new government can be forced to pay the debts of the previous regime, then, in your opinion, who really holds the power when there is a change of government? Leave your answer below. I read every comment.